Thank you so much for that wonderful voice of God. Very inspiring. Well, good morning. I want to welcome everyone to the 90th winter meeting of the United States Conference of Mayors. And it's so great to be back together for our first major in-person meeting since the start of the pandemic almost 2 years ago. We will have our official opening session at lunch today. But let me say this now. Mayors, business partners, city staff, and everyone else, welcome home. Welcome to the place where you are valued. The place where the most powerful officials in the country, as you will see over the next 3 days, recognize the leadership of America's mayors and will come to speak and interact with us directly. The two leaders of the House of Representatives will be with us, showing our ability to connect with both parties. As we always say, there are Republicans, there are Democrats, and then there are mayors. 11, let me repeat that, 11 cabinet members will be with us over the course of this meeting. As Tom would say, it's almost like we're turning the Capitol Hilton into the Roosevelt Room in the White House. High-level White House officials coordinating historic legislation that we helped pass into law will be with us. Numerous federal departments and agency staff members will be with us, engaging in discussions of some of the most important topics of the day. And we will cap the meeting off on Friday with none other than the President of the United States, Joe Biden. Mayors, if this does not show the value of the U.S. Conference of Mayors and the power we have to influence policy, then I don't know what else we can do. But as important as our engagements will be with all of our invited guests, the real stars of this meeting, as they have always been, are you, America's mayors. It doesn't matter if you come from the biggest cities in America or mid-size or smaller cities. It doesn't matter what your political party is. It does not matter if you've just taken office or if this is your first meeting. I remember my first meeting. At this organization, each and every one of you are valued. We want to hear your ideas. We want to hear your concerns. We want to learn from you. And we want you to know that we will all learn from each other. This is your Conference of Mayors. I know that Tom Cochran strongly believes in the power of mayors to not only deal with issues of today, but to seize defining moments that will alter the future of our great nation for the better. I share this same belief, and that is why this meeting has been designed to address some of the most pressing issues of our time, and to look around the corner to address the issues on which we will be judged by our grandchildren. We have shown that when mayors stand united, we can accomplish great things. And there are still great things that must be accomplished on behalf of the cities we all love and the people we are so proud to represent. So mayors, again, welcome home. Let's get to work. Thank you. Apparently, that was first-time jitters there. So now it is my pleasure to introduce someone who certainly is no stranger to mayors across America. As Deputy Assistant to the President and Director of Intergovernmental Affairs, our first speaker today has helped open the door of the White House to mayors and, just as importantly, been a strong advocate on behalf of our shared priorities. Tom Cochran is in a better position than I to judge this relationship, the relationship this organization has had with various White Houses of Intergovernmental Affairs. But let me say this, In my time in office, I have never felt more welcome in a White House and more listened to on policy. From the American Rescue Plan to the bipartisan infrastructure bill to so much more. Our first speaker helped make sure that the voices of mayors, Republicans, Democrats, and independents alike were heard by the highest powers in the land. Titles matter, offices matter, but more than anything, people matter. And I do not believe that President Biden could have made a better choice than this person to be our primary liaison. As we start this session and focus on coming back together in person and strengthening the partnerships we built in the virtual world of COVID, I am so pleased to welcome to our stage the White House Director of Intergovernmental Affairs and our friend, Julie Chavez Rodriguez. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Suarez, for that warm welcome. And good morning, America's mayors. It is so great to be kicking off the 90th U.S. Conference of Mayors winter meeting here, and more importantly, to see you all here in person. And I want to give a special thanks to Tom Cochran and the entire team at the U.S. Conference of Mayors. They have been tremendous partners and allies, and most recently, organizing a bipartisan sign-on letter with 151 mayors to advocate for voting rights and to ensure that we are doing what we can to protect this fundamental right as part of our democracy. And as the mayor mentioned, I am the Director of Intergovernmental Affairs at the White House, which has the privilege of being able to work with each and every one of you all to address some of the most pressing issues facing our communities and our cities. And together, mayors and the Biden-Harris administration have tackled incredibly difficult issues together. Our frequent and regular engagement with the administration and the conference is a real testament to the value that we see in each and every one of you all as we implement the critical priorities facing our country. And it's really opportunities like this that I have to be able to connect with you all individually. I'm sure we'll get invited to many ribbon cuttings as we continue to highlight the important and historic return on investment that we've seen from ARPA dollars investing in our cities, as well as being able to connect with so many mayors who are seeing ARPA funding for the first time being able to invest in areas of our community that for too long have been plagued by generational poverty and underinvestment. But this is really what it's all about. When President Biden came into office, he had a vision of being able to bring people together to get things done, to unite the country, and to prove that we can rebuild America and do big things together again. And we are showing the American people that we are continuing to move forward and we are preparing for the future. So again, it's wonderful to be with you all today. But I just want to take a moment to remember that 1 year ago, we weren't able to come together in this way and to meet in person here at the U.S. Conference of Mayors. In fact, 1 year ago, before the president took office, only 46% of our schools were open. The unemployment rate was at 6.2%. 18 million Americans were receiving unemployment benefits, and less than 1% of Americans were fully vaccinated. As you all saw in your cities, American families were struggling to make ends meet. Now, tomorrow officially marks the 1-year anniversary since President Biden and Vice President Harris took office. And amid several converging crises, this administration has moved quickly, working with you all across the country to deliver results for working families and to change lives for the better. Together, we got shots in arms and we helped save many lives. The president set up a historic vaccination program, and with the help of the U.S. Conference Challenge, now more than 2 million Americans are fully vaccinated. That's about 75% of all of our adults. Millions of teenagers and children are now vaccinated, thanks to the work that we've done together, and 80 million Americans have received booster shots. The president was able to close the racial equity gap in COVID vaccinations among adults. He delivered funding to you all to ensure that we could have now 96% of our schools open, and all of these steps have continued to save lives. Together, we also got people back to work. President Biden's first year was the greatest year of job creation in American history, with more than 6.4 million jobs created. And recent weekly unemployment claims are down. We went from 18 million Americans receiving unemployment benefits to just now 2 million Americans. Economic growth is the strongest it's been in 2 generations, and for the first time in about 20 years, the U.S. economy has grown faster than China's. The American Rescue Plan led to what so many experts are saying will be the lowest child poverty rate on record, and the unemployment rate is now down to 3.9%, 2 years faster than projected. Now that is progress that I think we can all be proud of. And this year, thanks to mayors across the country, we were able to pass critical legislation to be able to continue to build on our job creation and to address our crumbling infrastructure. You know, President Biden got the American Rescue Plan and the bipartisan infrastructure law passed, the most impactful legislative agenda that we've seen in a first-year president, thanks to all of you, to really making the case of what this means to Americans, what this means to your cities, and what this means to our communities. Now, with funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law, we will continue to create jobs, provide clean drinking water to all Americans, upgrade our roads, airports, and rail, and take a critical first step towards a clean energy future. Now, as President Biden and our office know, the stronger our relationship is with cities and mayors, the stronger our country is. And the president knows this can be a moment when America wins the competition of the 21st century by rebuilding our country with safe, reliable, and resilient infrastructure. But we know that for all the progress we've been able to make together, there is still critical work that we need to do. We need to ensure and really seize this moment to reimagine and rebuild a new American economy that invests in the promise and potential of every American and makes it easier for families to break into and remain in the middle class. And we believe that our more recent legislation and legislative proposal, the Build Back Better Act, will do just that. It's a critical investment in our human infrastructure, and it's about investing in American people, including America's children. So we look forward to continuing to work with you all to get this critical piece of legislation passed that will lower taxes and extend the child tax credit for millions, that will lower the cost of care, making universal preschool a reality, providing paid leave and expanding access to home-based care services for our seniors and people with disabilities, to lower prescription drug costs for our seniors, and to lower health care costs by extending the Affordable Care Act tax cuts. And we know that housing is a critical issue that so many of you all are facing. So yes, the opportunity to lower housing costs and increase the supply of affordable housing and construct up to 1 million units. But as I mentioned from the outset, we would not be where we are as a country without the critical leadership and the important role that you all play as America's mayors. We are grateful for the opportunity to continue to lift up your work, and we hope that you will continue to really shine a spotlight on the important efforts that you are making every day, whether it's in local media, whether it's in helping to really tell the story of the families that those ARP investments are impacting. We want to be there at every turn to make sure that we are shining a spotlight on America's cities and America's mayors. So thank you all so much for inviting us to join you all today. I'm so grateful that we have so many of our cabinet secretaries and administration officials that are able to join you throughout the course of the next couple of days, and most importantly, to be able to hear from our President, Joe Biden. Thank you all so much, and enjoy the conference.
Thank you, Julie, for our great partnership and for all you've done to help bring the administration to this meeting. It's now my pleasure to introduce the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, Michael Regan, who is serving as the 16th administrator for the agency. Before I invite him on stage, I wanted to be sure to mention that we, at the local level, have a lot to brag about when it comes to protecting both the environment and the health of our citizens. between the resources we spend on climate change, water, wastewater, solid waste, recycling, and restoring brownfield sites into productive use, we spend more money than I think anyone else to be good stewards of the environment. I'm so pleased that the infrastructure legislation included much needed resources for some of our most pressing issues. And I'm excited to hear about Administrator Regan's plans for leading his agency, working with us to protect the environment as well as implementing the infrastructure legislation. Please welcome the EPA Administrator, pretty good basketball player too, Michael Regan.
Well, good morning and Happy New Year. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. And Mayor, thank you for that introduction and thank you for your leadership. You know, I'm glad we're meeting so early into the new year because we have a lot of work to do together. And time really is of the essence. We laid a very strong foundation in 2021, especially considering the degree of agency rebuilding we needed to do at EPA. I'm proud of what we've accomplished. From tackling critical steps to confront climate change, to working towards rebuilding trust with underserved communities, to strengthening our nation's water infrastructure. But the truth is, we've only begun to scratch the surface. We have a long way to go to truly building a better America. So we're going to keep the pedal to the metal in 2022. I firmly believe that our success in confronting the biggest environmental challenges of our time will be determined by our partnership. As a state secretary of environmental quality in North Carolina, I saw up close how actions from the EPA can either help or hurt local efforts. And let me be clear on that point. I recognize that you all know your communities better than the federal government ever could. You are the eyes and ears on the ground. We need to hear from you. We need to leverage each other's expertise, and we need to re-energize our working relationship to meet the challenges of today and those that lie ahead. That's why when I stepped into this role 10 months ago, I made it a priority to get out of Washington, D.C., to actually sit down with mayors in their communities, to see firsthand the challenges you all are managing on the ground. Since being sworn in, I've had the pleasure of speaking directly with more than 50 mayors. And I'm committed to getting to know even more of you in the year ahead. The local level is where the rubber meets the road. And nowhere is that more clear than when it comes to water infrastructure. As mayors, you're on the front lines of the water infrastructure crisis in America. You're managing aging infrastructure, the disastrous legacy of lead pipes, emerging cybersecurity threats, and the pressures exerted by climate change. President Biden knows that water infrastructure is not an issue that state and local leaders can or should manage on their own. That's why the president has made transforming America's crumbling water infrastructure a cornerstone of this administration's agenda. And EPA is at the center of delivering on that mission. EPA, along with our mayors, our local partners, have proven that investing in water infrastructure is a win-win for public health and for economic development. I'm proud to say that in the first year of the Biden-Harris administration, EPA's Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovations Act Loan Program, or WIFIA, has invested more than $5 billion in communities all across the nation. Taken together, these WIFIA finance projects are expected to create over 36,000 jobs. And today, I'm excited to announce $688 million in new WIFIA loans to the City of Baltimore, the City of Milwaukee, and Union Sanitary District in California. Now in Baltimore, $396 million will help replace water mains and modernize water infrastructure across the city, with a focus on supporting low-income communities and communities of color. In Milwaukee, $42 million will help improve stormwater management and reduce flood risk in historically underserved communities. And for the Union Sanitary District, $250 million will help reduce nutrient discharges to the San Francisco Bay and to improve climate resiliency and system reliability. These investments prove that protecting the environment and strengthening the economy, well, they're not mutually exclusive. They actually go hand in hand. Funding in these three communities will spur an estimated 4,000 jobs in construction and operations. These loans represent the power of a dynamic federal and local partnership. They demonstrate that we can work together to address some of the most challenging, persistent public health and environmental challenges of our time. But our work is far from done. The successes that we've seen in 2021 are illustrative of the benefits that many more communities will see under the bipartisan infrastructure law. The infrastructure law provides the single largest federal investment in our water infrastructure history. $50 billion to replace lead pipes, protect our treasured waters, and build drinking water and wastewater systems that are resilient to the climate crisis. In 2022, EPA will be providing $7.4 billion of the infrastructure law funding to the state revolving funds, with a lot more to come over the next 5 years. Nearly half of this funding is available as grants or fully forgivable loans, removing the barriers to investing in essential water infrastructure in underserved communities across rural America and in suburban and urban centers. For more than 30 years, the SRFs have been the foundation of water infrastructure investments, providing low-cost financing for local projects across the country. But we know that many vulnerable communities, especially our communities of color, have not received their fair share of federal funding. Under the bipartisan infrastructure law, states have a unique opportunity to correct this disparity. During EPA's Journey to Justice tour this past November, I saw up close the frankly shameful results of this disparity across our South that has been in place for generations. As Mayor Lumumba will remember, I was set to meet with students and faculty at Wilkins Elementary School in Jackson, Mississippi. But on the morning of the visit, school wound up being canceled due to low water pressure. And just hours after I visited Jackson's O.B. Curtis Water Treatment Facility, the plant was forced to partially shut down, resulting in a boil water advisory for much of the city. But let me be clear, these issues are not unique to Jackson. I've seen firsthand the flooding concerns Mayor Duggan is dealing with in Detroit, the long-standing water infrastructure needs Mayor Jones is facing in St. Louis, the lead contamination that Mayor Baraka has worked diligently to confront in Newark. I've heard directly from parents in big cities, small towns, rural communities all across this country whose children have been exposed to lead in drinking water. They carry around the weight of that trauma every single day. Folks, we can do better, and it's our responsibility to do better. In the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who we've commemorated earlier this week, the time is always right to do what's right. And with the bipartisan infrastructure law, we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to do what's right, to confront long-standing inequities, and to build a better America, one that is healthier, one that is more inclusive, one that is protective of all people, especially our children. The implementation of the infrastructure law calls for a strong partnership, and EPA is ready to work alongside our local partners to ensure that all communities see and feel the full benefits of this investment. That's why in December, I sent a letter to every governor of every state sharing detailed information about our goals for using the water infrastructure money provided through the water infrastructure bill. I also committed to issuing guidance in the coming months that will go into greater detail to help ensure this historic investment reaches our most vulnerable communities. Let me be clear, for this EPA, environmental justice is not an add-on and it's not an afterthought. It is central to driving all that we do. And I am committed to working closely with each and every one of you, visiting more of you in your communities, and helping to solve these longstanding challenges together. This is a historic opportunity to change lives of the people who've been hurting for a long time, and to show people that their government, federal, state, and local government actually works for them. This is what I came to do, and I know that's what you all came here to do. So folks, let's get to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Administrator Regan. Our next speaker plays an extremely important role as White House Coordinator for Implementation of the American Rescue Plan, which is the U.S. Conference of Mayors worked so hard to pass. Gene Sperling has served as head of the National Economic Council and assistant to the President for Economic Policy for both President Bill Clinton and President Barack Obama. He is the only person to have served in this capacity for 2 presidents. Throughout his distinguished career, Mr. Sperling has shaped domestic policy on a broad set of critical issues. He has had a hand in creation of the Children's Health Insurance Program, the Child Tax Credit, expansion of the Earned Income Tax Credit, the New Markets Tax Credit, and now the American Rescue Plan. And that's just a few of his accomplishments. It is safe to say that few have shaped policy for children and families more than Mr. Sperling. In the White House, he is a strong advocate for cities and for an equitable economic recovery that reaches those who have been hit the hardest by the pandemic and its negative economic consequences. Mayors, please welcome American Rescue Plan Coordinator and Senior Advisor to the President, Gene Sperling.
Why take why underachieve and go for the podium near you? I really want to thank the leadership and the past leadership of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, including your new president, President Mayor Suarez. Thank you for the introduction. Congratulations. Nan Whaley, Jeff Williams, and the man that I have worked with during 3 different White Houses with 3 different presidents covering 4 different decades, Tom Cochran. They are applauding us, Tom, for being so old. I'm really honored to speak after our environmental leader of our administration, Michael Regan, and before the captain of our economic team, Secretary of Treasury Janet Yellen. And I will tell you that, there are few people I have ever worked in the White House who are such high performers consistently as Julie Rodriguez, our head of intergovernmental affairs. Her entire team is so amazing, and Luke McGowan, who works with me and her on the American Rescue Plan, delivers over and over again for both of us. I think one thing everybody in this room understands is that the American Rescue Plan had a dual mission. To, number one, combat the immediate crisis we inherited in early 2021 and jumpstart our economy. But number 2, to ensure that we as a nation and all of you as mayors had the financial power and flexibility to invest in a durable, equitable recovery, to take on not just the immediate, but the lingering impacts of COVID, and to provide all of us and you with an insurance policy and cushion against the unpredictable economic disruptions and the most prominent known unknown, the spread of COVID variants. This design was wise. In terms of its first goal in jump-starting us out of deep distress, we are not only the only nation in the G7 to have returned to our pre-pandemic levels of growth by the end of the second quarter, by June 30th of this year. No other G7 country had returned to their level of GDP by the end of the third quarter in September 30th. So make no mistake, the U.S. recovery has been faster than any of our major economic peers in the world by a long shot. The 6.4 million jobs created in President Biden's first year is not just the largest number that have ever been created in a calendar year. It's not really close. Second place was two-thirds of that in 1946, the year after World War II ended. Unemployment at 3.9%. We've reached that 4 years ahead of when the Congressional Budget Office predicted in February 2021, before the American Rescue Plan that all of you helped encourage passed. It has made a difference. And yes, make no mistake about it, we have to be focused on doing everything in the short, medium, and long term to build supply, to help reduce the price increases that are clearly affecting families across our country. But it is also very crucial to note how much the strength of this labor market, due to the American Rescue Plan, is reducing the long-term pain that has been felt often after a deep recession, what economists call scarring. After the Great Recession, when Congress refused to provide a major second recovery package, that lack of an economic cushion contributed to this scarring of both workers who were long-term unemployed and young workers who were entering the labor market for the first time. What economists show is that if a young worker goes into a very weak labor market, they start at lower pay, at lower jobs, and that they do not necessarily recover quickly from that, thus the phrase scarring. On long-term unemployment, I could give you all the analysis and numbers, but you can sum it up this way. When you lose a job for a few months, it hurts, you scrape by, but most of us have been through it, and most of us get by. When you lose a job for a year and a half, when you face long-term unemployment, people often lose their house, they often lose their spouse, they often lose their health, and economically, a significant percentage never fully recover. This is what's happened after the deep recession of 1982, after the deep recession, the Great Recession of 2009. It is very important to recognize that due to the power and strength and flexibility of the American Rescue Plan, those impacts, rather than increasing, are lessening. Let me give you, thank you. I don't want to just assert it. I want to give you the numbers that establish that. Because look, I was there. I was there as the National Economic Advisor for President Obama. I saw us recover quick, but then saw all of you not have the strength you need. I saw you contracted, had to, because there wasn't the support you get from the American Rescue Plan. And that meant job loss from state and local governments. That meant contracting from the economic recovery instead of contributing it. Now, long-term unemployment, in 2010 and 2011, it averaged 6.2 million. That meant 6.2 million families were stuck in long-term unemployment. What's it today? 2 million, one-third the amount. In fact, it was 4.2 million when President Biden came in before the American Rescue Plan happened. Since then, long-term unemployment and all the scarring and pain that goes with it has been cut in half. It has gone down more in the last 9-10 months than it has ever done in a similar period in the history of our country. That is an important impact on human potential and suffering. But let's look at youth unemployment. Do you know what it was like for a young person after the Great Recession? They averaged unemployment of 17.3% for 2010 to 2012. For 3 years, the unemployment rate for young workers was 17.3%. After the American Rescue Plan passed, it started falling quickly. It is now less than half of what it was in the Great Recession. It is 8.2%, one of the lowest levels. And that means all of those young workers who may have been scarred or held back when we didn't have the support needed because of the American Rescue Plan, because of the support you have, are now entering the workforce with strength, not weakness. What else is the kind of distress that goes beyond the numbers when you recover from a recession? You know, numbers get better. Who gets left behind? Often it was people who suffered severe housing instability. Today, and look, we all know it was hard to get the emergency rental assistance program started. It was hard. You know, we took heat, you took heat. It was a brand new effort to have a national policy to prevent unnecessary evictions. But where are we now? A really extraordinary 3.7 million renters are receiving assistance from that. 3.7 million. There has never been something that was even 1/100th of that in the history of our country. And evictions right now, not only did we not get the tsunami of evictions many of you feared, that we all feared, evictions are at 60% of historic averages. In other words, they're lower today than they are in a normal, non-recessionary year. And foreclosures are not only not skyrocketing, they are 1/3 the level that they would be in just a normal average year. Credit card delinquency, the lowest on record each quarter this year. So yes, we have to take seriously the struggle people feel with prices. But in terms of what we have done to preserve human potential, the potential of workers to put people and families in a position of strength, I think everybody here should feel very proud of what the American Rescue Plan has done due to both your advocacy and your implementation. Now, I would go on a little more, but guess what? The speaker to follow me is not only the Secretary of Treasury, she is, and I mean this, she is the single woman in the history of our country with the highest amount of government credentials we have ever had. Secretary of Treasury, Chair of the Federal Reserve, Chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, and just a top economist. So I will let her carry a little more of the weight on that. But I do want to talk to you about the urgency of the moment to use American Rescue Plan funds to address our most vital economic challenges as we enter 2022. And I'm going to be straight because we've all talked a lot and we have listened and done session after session as we both put in place the interim final rules for the state local plan, for the final rule. When the Treasury Recovery Officer, Jacob Liebenluft, who's here today, and Deputy Secretary of Treasury Wally Adeyemo and I held countless sessions, not just with you all, but with county leaders, governors. We heard one word over and over and over again: flexibility, flexibility, flexibility. Over and over again, we heard that each city and state has been hurt in its own unique way, has its own significant needs, and needs the flexibility to fix the fiscal health and economic damage COVID had brought. We agreed. But I want to say, in the spirit of Spider-Man, No Way Home, with great flexibility comes great responsibility. And I really mean this, and I think all of you, if you're looking at how the public is looking at us and looking at what we're doing in the American Rescue Plan, I think that they are looking and asking, are we using these resources that, as I said, had not just the power and flexibility to deal with the immediate crisis, but to deal with the lingering challenges you face now in 2022. People are asking, are we using it to address those top economic challenges? I think at the top of that list, I'm not going to say what's number one, but I think among the very top economic challenges that we as a country will deal with in 2022 is the issue of whether we are doing everything to retain workers in essential jobs and to expand the supply of workers needed to meet our economic, education, healthcare, and supply chain needs. However important the unique challenges each of you face, we have a collective obligation to show we are using the resources of the American Rescue Plan that are still available in 2022 to address the most pressing economic challenges in 2022. So I'm really focusing on one thing here, on workforce, but I just want to leave you with the following, which is, are each of us asking, are we doing everything we can with the American Rescue Plan to retain the workers we need? Are we going the extra mile to give hero retention bonuses, to help workers with childcare costs or necessary paid leave for Omicron absences or illnesses? Are we deploying our American Rescue Plan dollars to give more Americans the on-the-job training, the apprenticeships, the credentials at community colleges, the training with guaranteed jobs on the other side? Are we doing everything to meet this moment? Are we using American Rescue Plan dollars to hire teachers, an army of tutors to address learning loss, bus drivers? Are we hiring and creating the expansion of community health care workers, people that we may have hired to deal with contact tracing and are now helping on persuasion of vaccinations, but can go on to have public health careers and strengthen and diversify our community health workforce? Are we expanding? Are we using our resources to expand the number of workers in ports and other areas affecting our supply chain? Are we showing that we're using American Rescue Plans to bring people not just back to work, but back to better jobs, with better working conditions, with better job opportunities, and better career paths? Now, the answer is that many of you are. And we appreciate it and note it, and we have been discussing this with the President of the United States, and I'm sure he will address some of these things when he speaks to all of you. But even if you have been doing something, you have to ask as we enter 2022, are you doing enough? We have a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, historic, coming. Are we doing everything to ensure that we are doing the training, the apprenticeships, the on-the-job, to make sure that we can fill those jobs, and when we do, that it's equitable with the diverse workforce? Are we investing not only in retaining our care workers, but bringing on more care workers by raising the status and dignity and pay and career opportunities? And are we, many of you, to understand the real challenges, are you hiding too much behind the funding cliff argument? I understand that one wants to have long-term funding, but with the American Rescue Plan flexibility, with revenues increasing, isn't it more practical to start making some of the crucial hires we need? Now, I am not here in my role of American Rescue Plan coordinator to just preach. I am here to work with everybody here, to mobilize, to get stuff done. Many of you have seen that we have done that. We have mobilized summits on eviction diversion. We are about doing action. So we want to work together. We want to share best practices, technical assistance. We want to do mobilizations that we can work on different subsets of this workforce issue, from, again, supply to care workers to maybe a call for youth jobs over the summer. Whatever it is, we want to work together. We want to mobilize. I only have one work email. I don't have 3 or 4. It's just one, eugene.j eugene.b.sperling@who.eop.gov. eugene.b.sperling@who.eop.gov. We want to talk to you. Write, call, send carrier pigeon notes. Of course, there are wide areas of worthy ARP and American Rescue Plan investments that we celebrate and compliment you on. Of course, we do not mean that we want you to do less on affordable housing or broadband or small business assistance. All of these are crucial and transformative in coming back from American from the unprecedented challenges we have faced with COVID. But if you will forgive me for now changing my paraphrasing from Spider-Man to John F. Kennedy, please ask yourself, when it comes to expanding our supply of critical workers, what more can you do for your country with American Rescue Plan funds? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gene, for your work to help implement the historic American Rescue Plan and your strong belief in the power of mayors. We're now extremely fortunate today to have our keynote speaker for this session, the Honorable Janet Yellen, the 78th Secretary of the U.S. Department of Treasury. Secretary Yellen has a long and distinguished career in economics and public service. She is the only person to have served as the head of the White House National Economic Council under President Bill Clinton, the 15th chair of the Federal Reserve, nominated by President Barack Obama, and of course, President Biden's Secretary of Treasury. As Secretary of the Treasury, she has overseen critical parts of President Biden's American Rescue Plan, including the $65.1 billion fiscal recovery fund for all cities, and expansion of the children's tax credit, resulting in a 35 to 40% drop in child poverty in America over the course of 2021. She has also been instrumental in safeguarding the full faith and credit of the United States Treasury, so central to our nation's global leadership. Mayors, please welcome a friend of America's cities and an exemplar of a life devoted to public service, Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor Suarez, and thank you all for welcoming me. More than that, thank you all for your tireless work over the past 2 years. There have been few harder or more crucial jobs during this pandemic than being a mayor. Local governments have been the first line of defense against this pandemic, and as much as anything else, it's been the work of the city that has kept our recovery on track, and that's what I want to talk about today. Almost exactly a year ago, 364 days this morning to be precise, I was putting on a very large coat and getting ready to drive to the National Mall to watch President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris take the oath of office. It was an historic day for the country, but one that played out against the backdrop of real jeopardy. Roughly 3,900 Americans would die of COVID that day and the next. More Americans were applying for unemployment insurance than during the worst week of the Great Recession. And millions of people said they didn't have enough food to eat. Some economists were making dire predictions that the pandemic would plunge our economy further into recession, with many more jobs lost. Of course, such predictions never materialized. In fact, if somehow you transported a group of economists, including me, from that moment to today, and just showed us the current top-line data, we would be quite thrilled. Unemployment is now at 3.9%, the sharpest one-year drop in the rate ever. GDP now exceeds pre-pandemic levels, and 2021 witnessed one of the biggest reductions in child poverty and child hunger in American history. Yes, Omicron has presented a challenge and will likely impact some of the data in the coming months. But I'm confident it will not derail what has been one of the strongest periods of economic growth in a century. And none of this was guaranteed. I think it's important we recognize that. There's a very real counterfactual where Omicron did derail our recovery, a scenario where the new variant hurtled our economy backwards toward its state on Inauguration Day 2021. And it's an important question to ask. Why didn't that happen? Well, there are innumerable reasons. One, obviously, is that most of the country is now vaccinated. But it's also quite clear that mayors had something to do with it. The reason January 2022 is not January 2021 is in large part due to what's happening in local governments. I think the best place to begin this story is 10 months ago in March. That was the pivotal moment, a time where the future could have forked in different directions. In fact, it was the last time I spoke to many of you at a gathering of city leaders. The American Rescue Plan, or the ARP, had passed the Senate and awaited a final vote in the House. Many of you had teleconferenced into various congressional offices to push the bill to that point and to make the case for one of its largest programs, the State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund. $350 billion to help communities make it to the other side of the pandemic. At the time, I think we all believed that state and local funding was important, that it was essential. In retrospect, though, that program in particular, and the ARP in general, proved absolutely essential. You can draw a straight line between the ARP's passage and our economic performance during Delta and Omicron. As this group knows better than anyone, the first year of the pandemic decimated government budgets, forcing states and communities to lay off or furlough a collective 1.3 million workers. These were the employees we rightly called essential: teachers, first responders, public health officials. How would your cities be different if those essential workers stayed off the job? It's a question that probably has a very unpleasant answer. I think about the challenge schools are facing now. And then I imagine how they'd navigate that same challenge, but with hundreds of thousands fewer teachers and other school staff. And I expect that would have been the case without the ARP. Of course, you're the experts, but it seems hard to overstate how quickly and completely the ARP changed the everyday institutions that keep our society working. Hawaii, for instance, had planned to furlough 10,000 employees. But on the day President Biden signed the rescue plan, they canceled the layoffs. Denver was able to rehire for 265 city staff positions left vacant because of pandemic-related cuts, while Wichita, Kansas is hiring for 161 jobs, everything from animal control officers to security screeners to street and park maintenance workers. Many places have used the ARP funding not only to hire for the public sector jobs, but to rebuild elements of the private sector that are essential to weathering the pandemic. Columbus, Ohio, for example, is providing $1,000 signing bonuses for new teachers at child care centers. They're also granting scholarships to low-income families so their kids can attend. This, I think, is some of what the $350 billion did. When Omicron started spreading around our cities, it did not find them broke and broken. It found them much readier to respond. In some ways, the ARP acted like a vaccine for the American economy, protecting our recovery from the possibility of new variants. Well, the protection wasn't complete, but it was very strong, and it prevented communities from suffering the most severe economic effects of Omicron and Delta. Of course, the relief package did not predict when exactly those variants would emerge, but it did anticipate that our recovery would run up against some unforeseen barriers. The pandemic produced a highly unusual economic crisis, one tied not to the movements of markets, but to the spread and evolution of microbes. The crisis could ebb and flow. It would hit different places in different ways at different times. The state and local fund was designed with that in mind, too. Rather than one burst of money that could only be spent in certain ways, it called for sustained funding. And our Treasury team has worked hard so you can use the money as flexibly as possible. Indeed, in response to Omicron, cities and states across the country have used ARP money to put on a clinic in quick and creative government. Many have provided extra support to vaccine campaigns. Others have built up their public health infrastructure. In recent weeks, Minnesota has authorized over $80 million in ARP funds for everything from the distribution of rapid COVID tests to emergency surge staffing in hospitals. Then there are cities like St. Louis, which saw the two trends were colliding: the spread of new variants and the expiration of the nation's eviction moratorium. There was a risk that people were going to lose the roofs over their heads, something that would not only complicate our efforts to stop the spread, but also complicate people's lives for years to come. St. Louis had been busy dispersing dollars from the ARP's Emergency Rental Assistance Program, but also chose to use $58 million of its state and local dollars to keep people in their homes and shelter those experiencing homelessness. Today, eviction filings are 60% below their pre-pandemic levels. That's in large part because of work like that. We've avoided a national eviction crisis because mayors like you have helped build the infrastructure to deliver over 3 million rental assistance payments into the pockets of renters. In this country, we don't often recognize the crises that do not happen. We don't celebrate the bridge that doesn't collapse. But maybe in this case, we should. Last year, the first time I spoke to a group of mayors, I said that fiscal policy often finds humanity in the city budget. But in 2021, it may have been that our economy found its salvation in the city budget. Of course, the job of fully implementing the ARP is not done yet, and our team is ready to continue working with you on projects from building affordable housing to rehiring of educators to the laying of broadband. But there's a good argument without your work thus far, and without the Biden administration's relief funding, we would be reliving something approximating the early days of the pandemic, and not just now, but for some time to come. That was the lesson of 2008. During the Great Recession, when cities and states were facing similar revenue shortfalls, the federal government didn't provide enough aid to close the gap, and it was a profound error. Cities had to slash spending. That undermined the broader recovery. One study concludes that for every dollar local governments cut in spending during a recession, there is a corresponding drop in GDP of more than $1, and possibly as much as $3. After 2008, state government employment didn't recover from the Great Recession until 2019. Today, I can state unequivocally that history will not repeat itself. More than just protecting and accelerating our recovery, I think that the passage of the American Rescue Plan finally allowed us to do what most of us came to government for, not simply to fight fires and resolve crises, but to build a better country. It gave us a window to start building a better post-COVID world. By helping us alleviate the immediate crisis, the American Rescue Plan created the environment for new, transformational legislation. The infrastructure bill, the biggest investment we've made since Eisenhower built the interstate. And congressional negotiations are ongoing regarding the Build Back Better legislation. While we don't know the final form this will take, it will revolutionize how we care for children in this country, invest in climate change, and overhaul the international tax system to ensure corporations pay their fair share. Paired together, these pieces of legislation amount to a once-in-a-generation transformation of our economy. They will lead to higher rates of productivity, an expanded labor force, and greater GDP growth. And none of it would have been possible without the American Rescue Plan and your partnership with Treasury to implement it. I am forever grateful for your partnership during the last 10 months, and I look forward to continuing to work with you over the years ahead. Thank you very much for having me this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Yellen, for being with us today. Knowing all the issues you are charged with addressing, we are truly honored by your engagement in the 90th winter meeting. As a reminder, all meeting attendees must be tested using an antigen test prior to each day during the conference. The With Health Testing Center is open today and tomorrow from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Mayors, we have important meetings following this session as listed on your agenda. This session is now concluded. Thank you.